Paul McAuliffe.
Ken Corla, there's no doubt we are at a moment of grave international instability, so let me begin by acknowledging, I think, a number of things. The Iranian regime is a deeply repressive one. Its sponsorship of proxy terrorist groups, its involvement in terrorism in parts of the region, its destabilising activities in that region, as well as the very documented repression of its own people cannot be ignored. The brutality of those networks and the fear of Iranians themselves, of their own government, is, as I say, well documented. I think we also need to state really clearly that no state, however powerful, should act unilaterally outside of international law, outside of the United Nations mechanism, as imperfect as they are. When the United States chooses to bypass the UN framework, it weakens the very system that's designed to prevent escalation of global conflicts. The rules cannot only apply to some nations, they must bind the powerful too. Today, innocent people are paying that price. Innocent Irish citizens are sheltering from bombardment in the Gulf region. People with no part in the geopolitical rivalry are living in fear. Across the region, civilians are being killed, and as is always the case, every innocent life lost diminishes us all. The immediate priority must be a ceasefire, an urgent de-escalation of what is taking place, not tomorrow, not when it's politically convenient for one side or the other, but now. And I say that to the United States, to Israel and to Iran. There has been comments about there being two bully boys. Unfortunately, we have many more than two bully boys in this situation. And equally, there have been comments about what happened last weekend. But in the same way as October 7th didn't start the issues in Gaza, nor did the incidents last weekend start the tension between the United States and Iran, and there is a long documented history of aggression on both sides of that conflict. When you compare attempts made to the invasion of Iraq at the United Nations in 2003, and you compare them to the absence of any such attempts, even vain or for pageantry purposes, when you compare the absence of even that attempt at the United Nations, it's very clear that the current US administration feels they can act without even attempting to use international mechanisms for resolving disputes. So what should Ireland do? We need to return to our core principles and our support for the multilateral rules-based order. It's not an abstract ideal. It's the only viable alternative to chaos and increasing violence. If we concede that states can act unilaterally, we will return to a world governed more by might than by right. And we must also be honest, the United Nations itself requires reform. Even if a state did bring forward grievances and sought redress, the Security Council does not provide it. The Security Council reflects the power realities of 1945, not 1925 or 2025 and the years to follow. Africa has no permanent representation, South America has none, entire regions of the world are excluded from permanent decision-making authority at the Security Council. And that democratic deficit weakens the legitimacy of the Security Council, and in turn it weakens the compliance to its resolutions. It's the non-compliance to UN resolutions is eroding the trust and confidence that the world has in the United Nations. And you might ask yourself, is the United Nations on the precipice of collapse in the same way as the League of Nations ultimately came to? Now, there's no doubt reform is difficult, but necessary. We also know how difficult it is to secure and sustain peacekeeping missions. Vetoes are abused, mandates are difficult to secure, and consensus is fragile. What we now need to do is to focus on what is important to Ireland, what is important to our values. And Ireland has long been a proud supporter of the United Nations and of peacekeeping under its banner. As we have seen the groundhog develop at the Security Council, it is called into question our own reliance on our triple lock mechanism. I do not support a situation where China, Great Britain and the United States or Russia can exercise a veto over where and when Ireland sends its defence forces. Even small numbers of Irish troops with respected expertise in peacekeeping requires the permission of the 20th century imperial powers. It does not work in today's world. Respect for the UN does not mean surrendering sovereign judgment in the interests of the 5 permanent members. The proactive framework of the UN is vital. The protective framework, of the UN is vital, but it does not surpass our own sovereignty, which was hard won. If we are serious about peace, then the answer cannot be unilateral escalation, and we've seen in the Middle East over the past few years that escalation. We must see a renewed commitment to the international law, genuine reform of global institutions and equal application of the rules to all states, large and small.